Look at that level 100 Riz, bro.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for a cinematic odyssey through the 100 greatest films spanning from the roaring 1920s to the cutting-edge masterpieces of 2024. Carefully curated from the lovely people on Letterboxd. Two intrepid souls embark on a journey through a treasure trove of timeless classics and groundbreaking contemporary works, where each frame embodies the enduring magic of the silver screen. Grab your popcorn and join us on this epic expedition through a century of cinematic excellence, where every film promises to enchant, inspire, and leave an indelible mark on the soul. And now, for your listening pleasure, here are the LetterBros.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of LetterBros, where we let a wheel decide our fate on what movie we're going to watch next. I'm Felix. I'm here once again, joined by my friend Parker. How we doing today, buddy?
Doing good. I am sitting right in front of an active construction zone, so it's very entertaining to have there in the background. I'm sure that all of our listeners will enjoy it too. And it's a beautiful day to discuss a 3.5-hour movie.
And yeah, let me tell you, it's time is a funny word to say because it has been. So Parker just watched this movie, last night?
Yeah, I just watched this last night, and you watched it like a month ago.
I sure did. So there's been things that have, kind of hindered us from watching the movie at the same time and getting everything recorded. But we're here. What's most important, we're getting to it, discussing it, so that way we can go ahead and jump into our next movie, which again, we still don't know. We're going to let the wheel decide what we're going to be watching next. But today, we get the honor and the pleasure of talking about the 1982 classic, Fanny and Alexander, which at the time, again, of selecting our list was at number 46 out of the top 100 narrative-based features on Letterboxd. I know Parker has an intro for this movie, so I'm going to go ahead and let him do his thing.
Yeah, so for those of you who are like, what? You just released an episode last week. How is it that Felix watched this a month ago? Just to let you in on a little inside baseball, the first however many episodes of LetterBros are pre-recorded to make sure that we can consistently release for you guys to listen to. And there was a big move that has taken place in between, so I haven't been able to watch the movie. So that explains away the the jumbled timeline there for any of you that were actively connecting those push pins. But anyway, Fanny and Alexander, Felix. Wow, what a trip. Fanny and Alexander, or as I like to call it, Alexander, the rest of his family, and everyone other than Fanny.
Literally, yes.
It's directed by Ingmar Bergman, and forgive me, I'm going to butcher a lot of these Swedish names. But it's a richly layered film. It blends a little bit of trauma and drama and fantasy and a little bit of autobiography into one very unique experience. And I have to say, I genuinely mean unique. I don't feel like I've watched a movie similar to Fanny and Alexander before. But anyway, the story does center on Fanny and Alexander, who are two young siblings that are growing up in early 20th century Sweden. It features a great ensemble cast, including, here we go, Jarl Kuhl, who plays Uncle Gustav Adolf, who's a hilarious character in this film. John Malso, who plays the bishop, or we'll kind of get into his character, but he's the main antagonist of this film. And Iwa Froling, who plays Emily Ekdahl, who's Fanny and Alexander's mother. She also turns in a great performance. Tons of great performances throughout this film. And they all bring a certain depth and nuance to their roles. So it's a lot of fun to watch that go on. The film does begin with a depiction of the family's lavish life. We kind of are introduced via a Christmas party. And while they have this monstrous mansion, a huge house, it kind of juxtaposes this beautiful, lavish lifestyle with the internal angst and pressure and kind of disgruntled nature that these characters feel in each aspect of their life. And honestly, the whole first hour is just kind of introducing us to the characters, which we'll get into that a little bit later. The tone does shift dramatically, though, about halfway through the movie when Fanny and Alexander's father passes away and Emily remarries to a strict and very authoritarian bishop. This new marriage leads to a series of very eerie and unsettling events that kind of blur the line between reality and perception. Kind of similar to Danny in The Shining, Alexander is very highly perceptive and faces a harrowing and inexplicable occurrence. And meanwhile, Fanny is kind of watching from the background with a concerned look on her face. But overall, Bergman's film is loosely based on his own experiences, delves into themes of family, imagination, the clash between the mundane and the mystical, while also providing us with some incredible direction, incredible cinematography, and great performances. Overall, Fanny and Alexander is a compelling exploration of family dynamics, and I'm excited to get into it. I know that you think that the runtime went super long, but tell me, were you entertained throughout the duration of this movie?
So there were some aspects that I were entertained by, mainly the Christmas party. Like, I thought that was probably the most fun aspect of the movie, and I'm glad that that was a majority of the film. Just because after that, it just becomes really sad and kind of like, and because that's what I thought the whole movie was going to be. It's just going to be these two kids going through some rough shit for 3 hours, and I'm like, I don't know if I have the emotional like intelligence to get through this movie, but um again, like a lot of the Christmas party was the most enjoyable parts of it. There was a lot of like real aspects of like of the story, but it also like mainly it just felt really warm. I have it on my notes here that I haven't felt a movie this warm since watching The Holdovers, which
Yeah,
um
some similar vibes. It might be the Christmas setting though.
it might be the Christmas setting, but I also think it was just more so of like maybe just like how old the movie felt. I mean, it was made in the 80s, but it's a period piece of like the early, like you said, the early 20th century. But
1907 it takes place, which
yeah,
it,
which
it threw me
Mhm.
for a loop a couple times in this movie. I mean, they're getting taken around in horse-drawn carriage throughout
Yeah,
this.
they're
So,
they're getting like when Alex's dad Oscar becomes sick, like in the theater, and they're bringing him out in a wheelbarrow. Like, we got to take this guy to the hospital. Just slap him on a wheelbarrow and just start pushing. Like, yeah, it's definitely like the early 1900s for sure. But he ultimately ends up like dying from a stroke while he after the Christmas party where he is performing one of his he's performing one of like the shows that they're going to be doing, and a lot of the family is involved in the shows. And I think the matriarch, what's her name, I had to have a
like
literally
the
a list of all the
grandmother,
yeah,
what a great
Helena.
character. Yeah, I mean,
Helena.
she's so great. They're all so
she
great.
she's a bad bitch. She used to be an actress, and opened up this theater company with Oscar. And Emily, what is a rising like actress, and she's become part of the family.
I think you can definitely tell that this is kind of a mini series. So it should be stated that
Mhm.
there is a 5 hour version of this film that's broken up into 5 hour long episodes. And you can tell when watching the 3 hour version, which is on HBO, or Max as it's called now, you can
Yeah.
kind of tell that it is a 5 hour miniseries in essence, because as a 3 hour film, it's still very episodic in nature. So you have the Christmas party, right? Like that is the first episode, and you're
Mhm.
introduced to everybody, and it is it's a better time. It's more enjoyable in a sense that it's not dealing with as many traumatic issues and as many serious issues. The stakes are much lower in the first hour of the movie, and it
Yeah.
is really enjoyable. But
Mhm.
um, like you said, it kind of feels like the holdovers. I thought that we were going to have an entire 3 hour movie inside of this house during the Christmas party as well. I really thought that's what we were going to get. And I guess I could sit here and say that I would have enjoyed that more, because I did find it to be a very highly entertaining. I still like the direction that the film went, and it really did end up getting a little bit mystical and a little bit ethereal and supernatural to a degree.
Yeah.
Um, so do you have anything further that you want to say about like the first half? Because I feel like we really could discuss it in two different blocks.
Well, that's the thing. It's like what you said. It feels like this movie feels like it's three different movies trying to happen at once. But I think that does attribute it to the original like vision of it being a mini series where like what you were just getting used to all of these characters at the Christmas party. There's a lot of great things going on. There's a dude farting very loudly at children. Like, just when you're getting to that, you're now going to you just met Oscar, who's this, like, you could tell, like, there's some memory lapses going on there, but like you're feeling for these characters, and all of a sudden he dies, and now we jump into another completely different story.
Mhm.
Now Emily is finding, a new husband in the pastor, and there there was a lot of, like, you could tell that, like you said, that this was meant to be like an episodic series, and they introduce like these supernatural elements that don't really get explained much, but I mean, that's probably up to interpretation. Like, you could think that as, like, Alexander trying to cope with his surroundings and like trying to escape through his imagination. But I mean, and even with like what's his name, there's like an antichrist character in the movie, like, yeah, that's when they go to it's like towards the end of the movie when they seen
They're in
it,
the
but
puppet theater. It's
yes, correct,
yeah.
that.
And there's there's the bishop's aunt who's sick throughout the film. And there's two instances in which there is a quote unquote sick family member who is played by someone, I believe, of the opposite gender, and who is like shut off from the rest of the family.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting and kind of awesome. Like, it was such an odd thing to be taking place in the middle of what seemed up until that point to be a
Yeah.
very grounded movie. So
Yeah, Ismail is the name of the character.
yes, yeah, the puppeteer, his brother
His
or
brother,
cousin,
yeah, that they, like, again, like what you said, they shelter him off in, like, this random room, and they're like, "Oh, we don't really talk to him, but, like, he sings, he says his prayers, blah, blah, blah." But then you bring Alexander in there, and you, like, lock him in a room with this kid, and they start talking about, like, religion, and I'm thinking is literally, I have it in my notes here. I'm thinking Ishmael is somehow the devil as they begin to talk about evil thoughts and how Alexander wishes the bishop dead. But we'll get into the bishop being dead a little later. But I mean, there was a
we might
lot.
as well dive into it now, and then we
Oh
can
yeah,
kind of backtrack and talk about some of the other points. But yes, as we get to the end of the movie, Ishmael takes over essentially Alexander's mind, and throughout the film, it is being hinted to you that Alexander is able to break the barrier between the living and the dead. Okay, so you kind of get a little bit of I see dead people going on, where he's
yeah.
talking to his father and seeing him,
Mhm.
and some other characters that are not actually there in reality throughout the film.
Mhm.
And he's able to have some sort of connection with the sick aunt in the bishop's family, where he's seeing her, in a form of out of body kind of experience. So
Correct.
it's hinted to you multiple times that Alexander has this ability. And in the end, Ishmael takes advantage of that and allows Alexander to use the ability to break that barrier in order to light the bishop's house on fire, essentially,
Okay.
and kill him. So,
You think that that's how he died? You
what are you
think
talking about?
You think that Alexander had some hand in it? I thought it was just all like he's thinking about it, and Ishmael is letting him see that. Okay, because obviously, like throughout the movie, like the bishop is a prick, but he's played very well. Like
Oh
I
yeah,
thought
oh
the
yeah.
bishop was second most interesting. I mean, Adolf was pretty funny too.
Hmm.
Um, but the bishop is such an iconic villain, and obviously, like, he's made Alex's life a living hell. We can talk about the discipline scene at some point, but you know he just wishes this man to die so his mom could be happy, and I think that Ishmael is letting him see the events of what's going on. But I don't know if Alexander has like a because he can see things. I just don't know if he has like telepathy.
That's very interesting, because I thought it was basically explained to you that that is what happened, but it's
So
cool that we
because
have.
like Bergman, I feel like it's like what you're saying. We keep hinting at, we keep like seeing these things, but I think that that's more of like an afterthought that like he really wanted this to be like like a family piece, like a period piece with some elements of like the imagination, like because I think that's all it is. It's just Alex using his imagination to kind of cope with the things that are going on around him. Like,
See, I would disagree with you there because in the end, he does see this play out at the very least, sees it play out in real time. Alexander knows exactly what happened for the bishop to
yeah,
have died, and I found the circumstances to be odd. You know, they're very odd for it to
yeah,
happen naturally. So essentially, the sick aunt in the bishop's family,
yeah.
who is this gangly and oversized individual that's bedridden for the entire film, and I don't think he even
Mhm.
has any lines. She
No,
knocks at the end of the
she
movie.
does scream.
She screams.
Yeah,
She
she screams when she's literally engulfed in flame.
Yes. So she knocks her kerosene lamp over and catches herself on fire and then runs out of her room across the house and jumps on top of the bishop to smother him in flames also.
Yeah, but who moved the lamp closer? It was Advert. Advert was like, "Oh, you're cold. Let's move the lamp a little bit closer
Uh
to you."
sure.
Go watch the movie again, Parker.
Sure.
But I wouldn't. Again, Parker saw this last night and he's like, "Oh, did you want to get like a fresher mind and watch it?" I'm like, I don't like that's the thing. The movie itself was fine. Like it was nice to sit through. Like it wasn't like I hated my life while watching it. Bless you. Um,
Thank you.
but it's a 3-hour movie that definitely feels like you're sitting there and watching it for 3 hours. At least in my opinion. It was like I if I have to look at my phone to look at what time it is while watching the movie, it's dragging. It's really long.
I didn't experience that at all, to be
Really?
honest with you. Yeah.
Okay.
I actually paused the movie at one point to get up and just go to the bathroom, and I was like, "Wow, I'm already an hour and 20 minutes through this thing."
Mhm.
So I did like, I think the episodic nature of it that we discussed earlier kind of helped, and that we weren't sitting in the same atmosphere the whole time. Like it did, it
Yeah.
felt like a couple of different stories were being told throughout.
Mhm.
Um, However, I will say that this shorter version could have been much shorter. Like it, I'm interested to see, and I would. We can discuss this here in a moment, but I would go back and watch the 5 hour version. Um,
Oh, yeah?
and I think that there were some characters and some situations and some extended shots that, don't get me wrong, were beautiful and like entertaining that could have been reduced down. For example, there's a character of Uncle Carl who's a low life basically and
Yeah.
constantly asking for money. And he disappears basically an hour and 30 minutes into the film, and
Mhm.
he served literally no purpose to the plot at large other
Yeah.
than being, the the black sheep of the family. And I'm sure that it gets dived into more in the 5 hour version, but I'm curious as to why he wasn't just completely taken out, um, as
Well, that's
opposed
the
to still
thing,
still being
is
in
that
there.
he also had, like, almost like a monologue with his wife during the Christmas party that they're, like, diving deeper into, like, you know, he wants to because his wife is German, she's an immigrant, and that he only wants her to speak Swedish, like, she can't speak German, like, I guess, like, she's kind of looked at as, like, an outsider from the family because she's not Swedish, but, again, it's like what you said, all of these elements get introduced, and then those 2 just disappear from the movie entirely, like, I don't even know if we see them at the end party.
I I don't recall seeing them, honestly.
Yeah.
And then to talk about something similar, I would say the same almost could be said for Fanny, whose name is literally the first word in the title of the movie.
Mhm.
And I think it must be said that there's really not a lot of pop that Fanny's character gets.
No.
I would say that Alexander gets the most attention, and
Mhm.
it's kind of his story to be told. And then, honestly, is the grandmother. What was her name?
Helena.
Helena, and Gustav's character that get a lot going on,
Mhm.
and then Alexander's mother and the bishop, and all these great characters that were diving kind of deep into what drives them. I mean, Gustav has a whole ass mistress that his wife is okay with.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that in a moment, but there's a lot of really like complex and interesting things that are going on. And meanwhile, Fanny, who again, whose name is in the title
Yeah.
of the movie, I mean, she really is there
It's just
observing.
there.
She's just there observing. And I
Mhm.
guess that you could attribute some kind of, deep, profound idea to that, oh, she's the observer. She sees it all, if you really wanted to. But in my opinion, it it didn't make sense for her to not have, also a complex storyline going on. You're already
Yeah.
setting it up for 4 or 5 different characters. Why not give Fanny, again, who's in the title of the movie, something very
Yeah.
interesting for us to chew on? So I thought, maybe I'm sure that the 5-hour version goes further into Fanny's character.
Yeah.
Um, and for that reason, like, I would like to watch it. Because and not to drone on, but I still enjoyed the movie. Like, I want to
Yeah.
get that point across. Like, I still found it to be entertaining, and it felt shorter than its runtime to me. Uh,
Okay.
so I definitely, like I said, I would not mind going back in a while and watching that 5-hour version.
Yeah.
But you would not. You don't think you would revisit?
So just again, like thinking about it, like from the time that I've seen it to the time that we're recording, like I felt like I might have needed to watch it again just because it had been so long. But just thinking about it, like I enjoyed the time that I watched the movie, and there were definitely times where I texted Parker and I was like, dude, this is the best of the Letterbox movies that we have seen. Like it's very engaging. And like there were moments where I was truly enjoying the movie, but then again, like there gets some aspects of like, oh, we need to cut this down into 3 hours out of like 5 one-hour episodes. So then like I think it was towards the end that I was mainly like just kind of getting disengaged from it. Like that warm feeling that I had watching the first hour of the movie in the Christmas party was again the best part of the movie in my mind. And there is a scene that stuck with me that I have it here on my notes that like was probably one of the most terrifying scenes. It's when, Oscar has his open casket and all you hear is Emily screaming. That audio is now burned inside of my brain. Like I can't unsee that. And like, I just remember like, you're warm, you're comfortable in the Christmas party, and now all of a sudden you get this scene, and I felt like I was watching something completely different, and it sucked the mood out of me completely. Just like the color when we moved to the bishop's house, like when you're at the Ekdal house, everything is colorful, everything is vibrant, and then you go to the bishop's house and everything is just like it's gray, it's stone. Everybody there sucks so much ass. Like they're just terrible, awful people. Like even the bishop's sister, like which we also didn't really get a lot of like screen time for because they talk about how I think it was Edward who even talked about like, oh yeah, my sister is like a pain in the ass and she's such a terrible person. And then we get like one scene of her trying to tell the children what to do, and then we like really don't ever hear from her again. Besides when Helena's like male mistress or widower, like I don't know, that whole family, there's just a lot of like infidelity going on. But
Yes, there's a lot of infidelity going on, and there's already a lot of characters to try and it takes a while to understand who's who and how they're all related.
yeah, like
Um,
Helena had like they say it like he's a Jewish man who that she was like friends with, and they ended up like becoming like lovers, and the dude was actually best friends with Helena's husband, and I guess they were okay. Like I don't know how
well,
things are
well,
in Sweden, but
Helena's husband. It's also mentioned that he is cheating on her throughout.
yeah,
Because I forget who says it to Helena, but I think it's Gustav's character. He says, "You always had such a fine way of dealing with Dad's infidelities."
yeah.
Essentially, where she would just brush it off. Oh no, he was just on business. So that's a very I thought that too. I'm like, was 1907 just like a bunch of brothels and people cheating on each other and like
I
being
guess
cool with
there
it?
I guess there wasn't that much to do in 1907
I guess
besides
not.
have sex and go on sleigh rides.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so there's two more things that I kind of want to mention before we get into um, our ratings,
Yeah.
and then we can move on. But one is that I will say, for what was lacking in Fanny's character was definitely made up for in Alexander's character. I think he's
Yeah.
such an interesting character, and the kid that plays him does a great job. But he's such a little shit. Like there's so many times where he says just some out of pocket things. He makes up this whole story about the bishop locking his wife and children in the basement before they escape, and like the whole time, even still, like it could be interpreted as something that did happen. I mean,
That's what I'm saying. I was
it's
about to
not
say, I'm like, who said that he made that up? Who
it's
said
not out
that?
of the realm of possibility, but he's so brash and so defiant, and I think that it's a lot of fun to follow and kind of root him on, even though he knows he's going to get the cane, as he does, and you
Oh
had alluded
yeah,
to it
dude.
earlier. But he still says these things, and he is not easily put in his place. And I thought that
No.
they did a really good job writing, directing, and acting that whole character and
Mhm.
everything that he goes through.
Yeah.
Um,
I will say, like, he was one of the better parts of the movie, and he was a good vehicle for the audience because I mean, like what you said, like he had some debt. Like a lot of times you'll see like protagonists, like they just serve as a vehicle, like just for the movie, for you to just look at it through this person's eyes and then just go like, wow, that's crazy. But he and himself had his own issues. He had his own ways of dealing with the things that were going on around him that made him stand out. And I mean, just that in I keep wanting to say interrogation, but just like that discipline scene with Edward, like he showed a lot of like bravery and a lot more character in what I thought he because for a while I thought he was I thought that there was some hint of a disability in Alexander, that like,
well,
he's
when his dad is dying, he completely cowers to the floor. So
well, you could also like he looked pretty gross. Like the dad looked pretty awful, and you could attribute that to him just like not being able to because he's only like what he's like 10 or 11 years old in the movie, so like
yeah,
he's now
close.
having to process all of this. Like his dad is literally dying right in front of him, and his mom is he's trying to think of like, why is mom just okay with this? Like she's not like freaking out or anything like that. And neither is Fanny. Like Fanny just goes straight up to her dad and just says like, oh, probably like the only line of dialogue we got out of Fanny in the whole movie. But like he can't deal with that, and that's why I think he'd rather escape into his imagination and escape into that rather than face what's going on in front of him. But again, like I thought Edward was the best part of this movie, dude. Like I'm a sucker for good villains, and way to he was just like the way that I found tried to like look up his name. It was literally on a villains wiki page, and I'm like, is it really that bad? And I mean, like this guy's one bad motherfucker. Like
Yeah,
he's
and played excellently.
yeah.
Played so well. You know it's like a great performance when you actively hate the character.
Oh yeah, but that's the thing. It's like you actively hate him, but you also like just kind of respect the game. Like he's and like the way that he goes
Okay,
out. It's
okay, Felix.
what you kind of like what
Yeah, you just gotta
this
respect the abuse
this
game
man.
sometimes, bro. You just
Not
gotta
that
respect
part
it.
of it, but he
I'm just messing with you.
his rebound game is on point, dude. He's
Facts.
there for it. He's like and that's another one of the themes that I'm like you could attribute like what is religion's role in the life in the regular person's life in 1907. I mean like this he was there right for when Oscar is dead and she's looking into solace and into comfort like through the Lord, and she sees that through Edward, who obviously is taking advantage of this woman's feelings and making her think that like, oh, she's truly in love with this man until he brings her to his home and it just gets
Yeah. And I will say, Emily, so Fanny and Alexander's mother, her tone shift on the bishop is quite abrupt, in my
it is
opinion, as
yeah.
well. So she loves him to the point where she's willing to move her children into this home that she's obviously seen. It's drab, it's boring, and it's a whole new lifestyle. I mean, she's
Mhm.
completely swapping lifestyles into something that was from her lavish and loving home and just very fun into this very strict household that's run strictly by the ego of the bishop. And then a couple of scenes later, she's back at Helena's house, at her mother's house, and she's just like, I hate him. And I wish that there was, again, a little bit more of that shown, of her slowly realizing how much she hates this man. We get a little bit of it. And again, I'm sure there's more of it in the 5-hour film, but I wish that they had put more of that in as opposed to Carl's monologue, for example, about his wife being German. So
Yeah.
there were some options there where I wish we got a little bit more in some places and a little bit less in others. But I also, before we get into the ratings, wanted to genuinely highlight how beautiful I thought this film was. It is shot so stunningly. The set design from Helena's mansion to the bishop's halfway house, basically, and then to the puppet theater, which I thought was the most amazing set design in the entire movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so pristine. There's a tracking shot through the puppet theater at the end of the movie that I literally got goosebumps. I'm like, this is incredible. And the blocking, which is weird. Like, it's not often where I'll watch a movie and I'll think to myself, the blocking in these shots is incredible. But the way that the characters move throughout the frame and adjust their bodies and kind of shift the whole shot with the way that the characters are moving throughout it is really incredible and hard to do. Like, when acting and knowing that you have to hit this piece of tape on the ground or this exact spot and move on this word, it's done very well throughout the entire film. And I kind of wanted to highlight it because I can't say I've ever thought that about a film before. At least
You could almost think of it as like a play. Like, you could almost see this like working out like on stage, especially because a lot of the shots focus on just like one piece of the set, like, or each like act of the movie is taking place in one specific like portion. Like, you could have easily made this into like, act one, obviously, like in the Ekdal house, and you have everybody shot and moving around in the house, and then you move to the bishops, and then you're kind of switching through between like exterior shots, like when he's taking the kids out of the house, like sneaking them out of the house, which I still cannot for the life of me figure out, because like you see them go in the box, but then they go upstairs and there's two bodies on the ground,
right?
Clearly Fanny and Alexander.
Right. So it makes me think that, okay, the first way I rationalized it was they're dummies, but it didn't really make sense. I really think that there is an air of supernaturalism that's going on.
And literally just thinking about that, I was like, so can Alexander like photo project him and Fanny in a room late? Like, that was the only part where I was like, I don't really know what's going on.
I think the rabbi's character kind of does. And you know what? Maybe there's an interesting dichotomy there at play between the way that the bishop handles religion and the way that the rabbi handles religion, because they both tell Alexander to pray, right? And they both have religious themes that rule the way that they make decisions as characters. But one of them chooses to be loving and enjoy the fine things in life and help them escape, and there's that aspect of religious. And then there's the abusive and tyrannical rule that uses religion as an excuse to be a narcissist.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting dichotomy at play there as well. There's really a lot to analyze in this film. So I give it props to that. It's definitely a thinker, and it's not too convoluted to the point where you're like, I don't know anything that just happened, but it leaves enough for you to think about. And we'll get into it in lasting impression and like everything that we rate.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's like, I feel like if you end up actually watching the 5-hour cut, I might just do it too, just because, again, like maybe there are things that like, because we looked it up before we even watched it, because at first we were like, oh, it's a 3-hour movie, and then, oh, it's a 5-hour TV show, so we had to look up the differences. And I think someone on Reddit said that it explains more of the supernatural occurrences that are happening in the film. So who knows, if we watch this 5-hour cut, it might make my score jump up a little bit. And because
speaking of, let's jump into it. I haven't seen your score. You haven't seen mine. So
Yeah.
If you want, go ahead and dive into your rating of this. I'm eager to see what it is.
So this was my score here. So for enjoyability and rewatchability, surprisingly at the time I gave it a 9 out of 15. Like what I said, like I enjoyed my time watching the movie and I was locked into it at the time. Like yes, it felt long to me, but I mean I was locked in. I wanted to know what was going to be happening throughout. But I again, if we end up watching the 5-hour cut, I might want to jump back, but it's not something that I'm going to be returning to anytime soon. Story, I gave it a 10 out of 15. Obviously, like this, I feel like was more of like a character piece than it was a movie. Like we got to, look and study a lot of these characters, and a lot of them are fun to watch. A lot of them you want to root for, a lot of them you want to root against, but they're still fun to watch. Um, and the story element is there. So I'll actually change that to a 12 out of 15 because I really liked the story of it. Lasting impression, I gave it a 10 out of 15. Again, everything about the movie itself was good, and I liked the set pieces, I liked the music in it, I liked the characters, but it wasn't really something that again like hasn't connected with me and has left me like, oh my god, I need more of this. So I gave it a 10 out of 15. Visual and auditory, I'm actually going to change that to a 9 out of 10 because the music and the set pieces of it, again, were gorgeous to look at. Like, this movie was really nice to just like sit there and be immersed into what was going on. So I really enjoyed that. So I gave that a 9 out of 10. 8 out of 10 for pacing, only because again, we spend a lot of time in the Ekdal house getting to know and love all of these characters. And then towards the end, it kind of just like I would feel stumbles on itself and tries to just like rush to the end of the movie. So I gave that an, an 8 out of 10. Acting, 9 out of 10. I feel that all the characters that we were introduced to were played very well. Even characters that we were introduced to at their time in the spotlight and were really good, but then just kind of left the movie. But again, like I'm not going to knock anything off the performances that we saw here. So I'm going to give that 9 out of 10. It was really nice, really stunning performances all around. 8 out of 10 for suspension of disbelief. Actually, I'm going to change that to a 9 out of 10 because again, we're here for the 3.5 hours, but I never felt like I was ever taken out of it. Only in like a couple of aspects of it, but overall, like you felt like you were in the 1900s in Sweden. You felt like you were there sitting with Alexander, not Fanny, just Alexander. Just watching everything play out, and you were never left like in disbelief, or that you never really felt like you weren't there. So I would give that a 9 out of 10. Originality, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. There wasn't really anything that was, that I hadn't seen before, except like these characters and the way that it was shot. So I would actually go and give that a 7 out of 10. And then lastly, attachment, I'm going to give that a 2 out of
5.
Only because again, like I enjoyed the time while I was watching it, but it wouldn't really be something that I would go back to or leave like a lasting impression on me. Like I wouldn't include this in like my top 10 favorite movies, but for that reason, we'll give it a 2 out of 10 for a total score
of 75.
Wow, you are so smart. Those are my scores, so I'm very interested to see what you went ahead and gave it.
Yeah. So based off our conversation this episode and texting with you just beforehand, I thought that your score was going to be lower than this.
I thought so too, but then just thinking about it a little bit more, like yes, like I'm highlighting like a lot of like the faults that I had with the movie, but there weren't that many to highlight. I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it because in my review originally, like right off the bat, I gave it a 72, and it's still higher than both movies that we have already seen so far. So it's very weird. I wouldn't watch it again, but I had a really good time while watching it, if that makes any sort of sense at all.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. All right. So I'll dive into my ratings here. They're going to be pretty similar. So for enjoyability and rewatchability, I gave it a 10 out of 15. I think that it's highly rewatchable for a movie of its length. And I think that if I were to watch it again, I would pick up on a lot more, knowing what happens down the line. However, I will say that there were some moments that I wasn't 100% engaged. It's definitely not one that I'm going to pop on any given night. And it's definitely one that you have to like. It's an impossible movie to put in the background, probably just because it's not in English. So it forces you to engage in it actively the whole time, and that's fine. But it's not the most rewatchable film I've ever seen, but definitely enjoyable. For its runtime, rewatchable in that sense. The story, I'm hesitating to give it a score this high, but I think it is deserved. I gave it a 12 out of 15. I think that there are some aspects of the story, and we already kind of discussed it, that could have been replaced by other aspects of the story. And I think that it kind of wandered off at times, but I still felt that it added to the dynamic of the family at large, no matter what we were watching. And I think that what hurts it and prevents it from going any higher is the fact that Fanny is really not part of this film.
When her name is in the title.
Yeah. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and give it an 11 out of 15. You know what? No, keep it at 12, because I deduct from this actually in the suspension of disbelief category. Feels more apt to me. But lasting impression, I give this film a 9 out of 15. I think that for the most part, it will stick with me, but it's definitely not one that I'm like actively chewing on still. I think discussing it has brought up a lot, to think about, but 9 out of 15 feels good. It's a little bit more than half. Obviously has some staying power in the film community. All of these films will, but yeah, it's not really sticking to my brain 100%. So I think that if I don't rewatch it, there's definitely going to be some aspects that I forget about. And for that reason, I give it a 9. Visual and auditory appeal, I give this a 9 out of 10, because I think that visually it is a 10 out of 10. And like in terms of its audio, it's an 8 out of 10. I think that the soundtrack and the music that was scoring the film was very good and added to the film when I was watching it, but it's not a super memorable soundtrack in and of itself. So for that reason, I can't give it a full 10 out of 10, but it looked great. I thought, again, the cinematography, the blocking was absolutely incredible. So a 9 out of 10 there. For pacing, I give it a 9 out of 10. Again, there were just some moments where I felt a little bit out of it. It kept me engaged for its runtime, but the fact that I have to use that stipulation knocks it down from being a 10. So it was engaging for its runtime, but I can't say it was 100% engaging 100% of the time. The acting, I'll give a 9 out of a 10. All the performances that we got were really good. I wish that we got more from other characters that could have given us, a reason to give it a 10. There was no acting that took me out of it, per se, but there also wasn't anything like that mind blowing to give it a 10. So I think that I often settle on a 9 out of 10 for acting. But I think it still fits here. A suspension of disbelief, I give it a 7 out of 10. There were some moments where I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, he's taking the kids from the bishop's house. I can't lie, for a second, it took me out of it there. I wasn't really sure what was happening. And I think that the ambiguity is a good thing, but I also think that there's a lot that's not explained when it should be. So I'll give it a 7 out of 10 there. Originality, I gave it a 10 out of 10. I mean, it's based pretty much on this director's life. I believe it was his last film. I felt that all of the ideas presented were wholly original. And the direction that the film took was not something I've seen before. We went from a family drama that was entertaining, a little bit lighthearted, and still very interesting, to a film that dives deep into some supernatural and post-mortem oddities and how people deal with grief. So I thought it was really an original work, and I love to see that, especially, obviously it wasn't made today, but in today when we have so many sequels and remakes coming out, it's always good to see a movie that is so original, such as this one. My attachment, I'll give it a 3 out of 5. I feel that I'm a little bit more than halfway attached to it, and for that reason, I give it a 3. It's definitely not in 4 or 5 category. I would say closer to a 2 than it is to a 4, but I feel good putting it there at 3. So yeah, an overall of 78 out of 100 for me is also my favorite that we've watched so far. So yeah, let's average it out and let's put it up on the list.
And it averages out to a 77 for the both of us. So about 76.5.
We'll round up there.
Yeah, correct. So with that, it does put this as the highest ranked movie for LetterBros.
So bring us through the whole top 3.
So, well, right now we had Sunset Boulevard as our highest ranked among the two of us. Sherlock Jr. just went below that for our average rating, but Fanny and Alexander now takes the number 1 spot with our rankings.
This movie was longer than Sunset Boulevard and felt shorter than Sunset Boulevard, in my opinion.
It felt shorter than Sunset Boulevard?
Yes, because Sunset Boulevard, in my opinion, dragged, and this dragged far less.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. So Sunset Boulevard takes the 2 spot, which sucks because I really liked Sherlock Jr., but it's our lowest ranked movie.
We still have 97 movies to watch.
We sure do, dude. But overall, any last thoughts before we jump into what's going to be our next movie?
Let's spin the damn thing.
Let's spin the damn thing, brother. Let's pull her up right here. There she is in all of her glory. It's the spinning wheel. I don't know why that's here. There we go. All right. So we're putting Fanny and Alexander in the rafters. She's going over there. And now we are going to venture out into our next movie, which, funny enough, we haven't said another movie today.
No, we haven't. Let's keep it that way.
Good.
We won't try to mess with the juju.
No, let's not mess with the juju. So with that, let's give her a spin. Oh my God.
So many movies.
Yeah, baby. Let's go.
No. It's so long. Sir. It's so long.
We're gonna get into Lawrence of Arabia, baby. Yes. Oh, I'm so excited.
Okay.
So funny enough, again, like I've never seen Lawrence of Arabia, but I've only ever heard, like, at least for me, like I've heard good things about it, and I mean, like I've seen like clips of it here and there, and I don't know, man. It looks like it's gonna be a lot of fun.
It's almost 4 hours long.
I mean, we said the same thing about Fanny and Alexander, and look where it is.
It's true.
All right, so Lawrence of Arabia, released in 1962, directed by David Lean. It is a mighty motion picture of action and adventure. The story of British officer T.E. Lawrence's mission to aid the Arab tribes in their revolt against the Ottoman Empire during the First World War. Lawrence becomes a flamboyant, messianic figure in the cause of Arab unity, but his psychological instability threatens to undermine his achievements. And it is like what Parker said, it is have you seen this movie before?
No.
No.
It's just I've been wanting to, but it's a hard pill to swallow. It's like
it is. But what a movie, dude. What a classic. I'm glad that we're getting a movie that I have personally heard of before, though. Because again, like a lot of the other movies we've seen, which have been nice to kind of dive into kind of blindly, it's nice that we're getting something somewhat familiar in Lawrence of Arabia, but who knows? I might just be talking all of this game, and then we jump into the next episode, and I'm like, never want to watch this movie again. But
we will see. We will see. I am interested to dive into it. So,
Other than that, this was a good time. Glad that we have put Fanny and Alexander, and given it its praises, and have put it up, and now we can focus on Lawrence of Arabia, baby.
All right.
But anything else to close out? Where can people find you, Mr. Parker?
Yeah, absolutely. So as always, Felix, it was great discussing another movie with you. Definitely, one of the week's highlights is always getting on the horn and talking cinema with my friend. So
heck yeah, dude.
But for sure, if you are so inclined, go ahead and follow me on Letterboxd at Parker_Paget. You can kind of see, get a little sneak peek into my feelings on the movie before we talk about it. Perhaps, again, we are pre-recording a certain number of these episodes, so not necessarily. And then you can also find me. It is almost haunt season, so you can also find me over at Spooky Senders podcast, where we discuss horror movies. mostly horror events like Halloween Horror Nights, and a little bit of booze here and there. So check us out over on Spooky Senders if you're into the Halloween community. Be much appreciated.
And you can also find me on Letterboxd, ETZIO911 on Letterboxd. You can also follow the LetterBros Letterboxd account, where you can see our scores from these episodes on there. You can also find our review bracket there as well. If you are interested in Star Wars content, you can also follow me on Batu Boy, BATUUBOII. And you can also follow LetterBros on Instagram at LetterBrosPod, wherever you get your social medias. And you can also listen to this as a podcast format. If you don't want to see our faces and you just want to hear our voices, that's fine. You can listen to us on anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcast. But other than that, we will see you at the movies.
Yeah, and don't forget to like, and 5 stars and all that. I don't think we've mentioned that yet in any of the episodes. So
no,
if you stayed with us this far, and you're 3 episodes in and you've been enjoying what you've been hearing, then please go ahead and drop us 5 stars. This is me and Felix's first podcast endeavor, so it would mean a lot to see people out there enjoying the show for sure.
Absolutely. And if you've already 5-starred in your heart, that's great. Thank you. But please go do it physically because it helps us out a ton. So thank you, and we will see you at the next one. Lawrence of Arabia, baby!